after what was cautious optimism about the two Koreas improving their relations and possible progress on coordinating dialogue between Washington and Pyongyang. Efforts for peace on the peninsula is proving to be as precarious as ever. Early Wednesday morning, Kim Yong-chol, vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee, warned that the regime would make South Korea and the United States feel an immense security crisis. This comes a day after the North appeared to ignore Seoul's scheduled call on their recently revived communication channel as a show of protest over the South holding joint military drills with the United States. We discussed the latest developments today with Chun In-bum, retired Lieutenant General and Commander of the Special Warfare Command of the Republic of Korea Army, and Kim Jae-chum, Professor at Seogang University's Graduate School of International Studies. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning. And well, to start with you, General Chun, it looks like North Korea's, they woke us up with some aggressive rhetoric this morning. And well, Kim Yong-chol, he said that the North is going to make the South Korean-US alliance feel an immense security threat. And of course, this comes a day after Kim Yo-jong, the North Korean leader's younger sister, said that the regime will continue to strengthen its preemptive strike capabilities. So, in response to the military drills that are going to be held next week, how do you think North Korea is going to retaliate? Do you think it's going to be able to do anything dramatic, given the country's current struggles?
Well, I'm sure that North Korea will go into their usual rant about the inappropriateness or the aggressiveness of the exercise. But then again, I believe that North Korea has been saying this all along, and that we should not be surprised that they would do this. This is a perfect example of how North Korea has been able to blame the alliance as well as South Korea for their own actions. And it would only make sense that North Korea would focus on solving their hardships and the bad management they've shown to their COVID situation. But it would only seem to me that, unfortunately, that North Korea would be shooting off multi-million-dollar missiles. But then again, that is exactly why we have these exercises in the first place.
Well, Professor Kim, after warning Seoul and Washington not to hold their joint military drills, Pyongyang decided not to pick up the phone when South Korea called at an appointed time on Tuesday. Does this surprise you at all? North Korea's always opposed each and every joint drill between the South and the United States, but why is it acting so sensitively to this one?
Kim Yo-jong said that the restoration of the hotline was just a physical reconnection, nothing more, nothing less, which basically means that they can disconnect the hotline as they see fit. Kim Yo-jong also warned that if the joint military exercise takes place as scheduled, there will be consequences and repercussions. I think the South Korean government put in good faith efforts here to downsize the exercise, but it was, South Korean government was in no position to cancel the exercise altogether, particularly when North Korea hasn't done anything really to denuclearize themselves. So the exercise will be held, though in different manner that is different from the original plan. But obviously, this didn't really satisfy the North. So Kim Yo-jong once again reciprocated with the harsh rhetoric. She said that the North will continuously strengthen preemptive strike capabilities, and finally decided not to pick up the phone. So the South Korean government has really hoped that the restoration of the hotline would also restore the momentum for, what is known as the Korean, Peninsula peace process. But I'm not really sure whether this is going to happen. Why is North Korea reacting so sensitively this time? I think it's because North Korea is struggling big time, because of the sanctions and also COVID, and then the flood and all. North Korea is in desperate situation now. And I think that may be the reason why North Korea is reacting very sensitively this time.
And General Chun, what happens at these joint military drills, the crisis management staff training that's happening this week and the main combined command post training that's taking place in mid-August or next week, really?
So the mission of the military is to deter enemy aggression, and if deterrence fails, to defeat the aggressor. That is the mission. And in order to accomplish this mission, they train. And so during the crisis management staff training process, the main goal is to deter. In other words, not to go to war. I think this is something that's very important for people to understand, that there's a great deal, in fact, 1/3 of the entire exercise is devoted to finding ways of not going to war, to finding ways to de-escalate tensions. So that's what happens at the crisis management exercise. It's a very going back to normalcy kind of stage. During the second and third part of the exercise, once deterrence fails and the enemy attacks first, the alliance absorbs the attack, regains the momentum, and then counterattacks to regain the losses that have been caused by the attack by the North Koreans. So that is why we say that these are defensive in nature. And just because we are counterattacking, counterattack means that the other side has attacked first. So just because we are counterattacking, some people think that this is an act of aggression, that is a provocative exercise, but that's just not true.
And General Chun, then how should South Korea and the US respond to what North Korea said this morning? Kim Young-cho saying that they're going to show us an immense security threat. What should be done in preparation to that kind of threat?
So I think we should maintain our course and train and exercise so that we can prepare for any kind of contingency that might arise. And so this is not the first time that North Korea has made such statements or threats, but maybe it is in their innate nature that they must do this for internal audience, as well as, that's just the way that their business has been done. So I think that we should stay calm, but stay vigilant.
And Professor Kim, well, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently criticized the upcoming joint drills at the ASEAN Regional Forum on Friday. He said that he also said that the United States shouldn't take any actions that would intensify tensions if it wants to resume dialogue with the North. And it also called for global sanctions to be lifted. So why does China feel that it's in its interest to back the North right now?
I think the answer is quite simple, to be honest. It's because to China, the strategic value of North Korea looms larger and larger as the competition between the US and China gets tougher and tougher. It's true that the relationship between the two countries, between China and North Korea, is very complicated. China is not really happy with North Korea, playing with, working on these nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, because they can be used as pretext for the US to deploy American strategic military assets on the Korean Peninsula. Likewise, North Korea at times has expressed, frustration and mistrust toward China. But that said, I think the geopolitical rivalry between the US and China is drawing these two countries very close. As long as North Korea refrains from launching major military provocations, such as test firing nukes or ballistic missiles, I think China will continuously act as the most reliable patron country for North Korea. And to China, it's not just North Korea, but the entire Korean Peninsula can be an important buffer zone in the US-China strategic competition. And that's why China is so eager to reduce American presence in South Korea by trying to cancel, this ROC US joint military drills and to roll back American strategic assets from South Korea. And if they can weaken the ROC US alliance, that'll be really great. That'll certainly work to their advantage. You really have to see this big picture here.
And General Chun, Beijing has also continued to pressure South Korea to scrap the anti-ballistic missile system here on the peninsula. How should South Korea and the US then respond to China's attempts to really interfere in security issues here on the Korean Peninsula?
It's very disappointing that Chinese senior officials are maintaining and advocating such demands. We've already expressed our position that these are defensive measures that we need to defend against a outer threat, mainly from North Korea. And I'm sure that they understand that. So I think if the Chinese want to make such demands, that they should be first telling the North Koreans, their friends, to lower the threat level. And why would we need, defensive weapon systems if there's no threat? So I think China, if they are really trying to help the situation, should be directing their advice to the right people and not to South Korea, especially concerning THAAD or exercises.
And Professor Kim, some have suggested that South Korea and the United States should try and completely integrate North Korea into the alliance-led order to balance China. Do you see this working at all?
That idea to integrate North Korea to the alliance-led order has been out there for a long time. But more recently, I think it's Vince Brooks, the former commander of Combined Forces Command, revisited this idea in one of the leading journals. As I said, Korean Peninsula is the fulcrum of the U.S.-China competition. And it's strategically very important. So China is trying to expand its sphere of influence to South Korea. And likewise, if the U.S. can somehow expand its sphere of influence to North Korea, that'll work to the advantage of the United States tremendously. But that said, I think it's a lot easier said than done because there are so many hurdles that you need to cross. Well, for starters, the U.S. should be able to drive the wedge between China and North Korea. But it seems to me it's going to be a tall order because China is doing everything, really everything, to keep North Korea on its side. And to China, North Korea keeping these nuclear weapons is okay as long as the North doesn't really venture into major military provocations with these weapons. But to the United States, North Korea will have to somehow move to the path of denuclearization in order for the U.S. to bring the North to its side. Sure, if somehow the U.S. can convince the North that there is a better future if you open up your economy and then take steps toward denuclearization, Kim Jong-un understands that if they open up, it could eventually undermine their regime. That's why Kim Jong-un thinks that the nukes are the most reliable security guarantor, and then China is the most reliable patron country. So it's going to be extremely difficult to change this perception of North Korean regime. So to me, it's a very creative idea, but idea that can be hardly materialized for now.
And General Chun, well, as for inter-Korean peace, well, South Korea and North Korea, they agreed to diffuse military tensions along the border in their September 19th agreement. But has the agreement made a difference over the last 3 years? And if there's any hope for that, what further developments do you hope to see?
The Comprehensive Military Agreement, the CMA, has contributed to lowering tensions along the DMZ and the northern limit line along the west and east seas. Now, this was agreed upon at great sacrifice from the South Koreans and the alliance in military capabilities to support the peace process. And to a degree, I think we've succeeded. But now we find ourselves in a position where North Korea is using the CMA and now demanding that combined exercises be canceled altogether. Now, we have already taken out the field training exercise portion of the exercise. We have tailored the exercise to the bare minimum. And what we are doing right now is just basic training. And yet, North Korea to demand these demands according to the CMA. So I think North Korea really needs to adhere to the spirit of the CMA and work for continued peace for our both nations.
And Professor Kim, before there's any dialogue between North Korea and the United States, it seems Pyongyang wants Washington to lift sanctions on some minerals and luxury goods. However, Antony Blinken called on countries at the ASEAN Regional Forum last week to fully implement UN sanctions on North Korea. How do you think Seoul is then going to try and pull the two sides together? And is the discussion over the humanitarian aid, is that a good start?
Well, Soo-young, North Korea said that the U.S. would have to do away with these hostile policies first. If the U.S. wants to resume nuclear negotiation with North Korea, you guys will have to get rid of these hostile policies. But they haven't really clarified what they mean by hostile policies, but it's quite obvious, that they want sanctions lift as a precondition for resumption of the negotiation. The problem here is that the U.S. is also very adamant about their position, and their position is that there's not going to be any precondition for reopening these nuclear talks. There's not going to be any incentives. More specifically, sanctions lift is out of the question. I think the South Korean government has been a little bit ambiguous about its position on sanctions lift. I'm under the impression that the South Korean government imparted these messages to the United States, implicitly or explicitly, that the U.S. should lift a couple of sanctions to sort of rekindle the momentum for the nuclear negotiation, and also for the inter-Korean dialogue that has been in stalemate. But the South Korean government also understands that if you keep asking for these sanctions lift, it could backfire. It could undermine the ROK-US alliance. Maybe the South Korean government thinks that the suspension or downsizing of this joint military drill can bring North Korea back to the negotiation table between the U.S. and the North and also between the North Korea and South Korea. But the military drill, is going to take place as scheduled, but it's quite different from the original plan, but it's going to take place. And North Korea, Kim Yo-jong expressed this anger and said that they felt betrayed, and they would work on, strengthening these preemptive military capabilities. I think South Korea was already in difficult position, but this ill-fated decision, ill-conceived decision to downsize the military drill made the situation even worse. Maybe a humanitarian aid can be a good start, but North Korea said that they are not interested, so there's not going to be any easy breakthrough as for now.
Well, as ever, it's a very complicated equation, solving the North Korea enigma. But, well, this is where we'll have to end the discussion today. That was Chon In-bom, retired Lieutenant General and Commander of the Special Warfare Command of the Republic of Korea Army, and Kim Jae-chon, Professor at Sogang University's Graduate School of International Studies. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.